You ready for some coffee? Coffee? Coffee?
You know it's a drink. Hello, welcome to Coffee Talk. Thanks for being here on this beautiful Saturday evening. I am here with Bob McGoldrick. So, recognizable face, obviously, if anybody was a part of the Christmas Eve services. So, can you kind of go through a little bit of your history with Suncoast? Because you volunteer in the coffee area. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So, how long have you been hanging around Suncoast?
About 4 years,
Okay.
maybe a little more, but it's on average. And basically, Joni's the one that found it.
Did she? Will you kind of move that mic down just a little bit so we can all hear you? Yeah, make sure that's right up and close. Okay, so Joni, your wife, found
She
Suncoast?
found the place. We drove around looking for a place very similar to what we were going to up in Philadelphia, and this came the closest.
Very nice. Did you guys just kind of, were you trying out different places? Or
Yes,
you had heard
she
about
actually saw those services online
Ooh,
and went from there.
that's awesome.
And then we did the tour, the bus tour around, and did that, and kind of we were then convinced this is where we want to be.
That's really cool. Well, I am glad because you helped us out tremendously with the Christmas Eve services. So, do you have a background in acting at all?
Not at all.
No?
In fact, the one time I did some acting was in junior high school. And I had a part in the show where I was basically the Western Union person. And I was supposed to be calling this person who was in bed. And it was time for me to get up to the microphone and do my part. And all of a sudden, the drama coach just stood in front of me and did it. And I kind of looked at him. He just smiled at me when I got done. I said, well, I guess that's not my forte, so I'm leaving.
Oh,
So
no.
I haven't done it since then.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. Never explain why. So
I feel like that's what show business is. They just do things and then they never explain why, and then everybody thinks forever, for the rest of their lives, what did I do wrong?
he says, why aren't you coming back to drama class? I said, you got to be kidding me.
But thankfully, you had other areas for your creativity to show, which art is one of them.
Art on architecture.
Art and architecture. So we did a podcast last week and kind of went through a little bit of your life story. I feel like we dove slightly into each little one, and I would love to have you back on for more. So I would encourage you guys, we're going to be posting that probably tomorrow or Monday. So that's a really, really fun one to watch. But let's go to a little bit of your art background. We have a couple pictures that I want to show. But first, where did you begin art, and where has that kind of taken you?
Started doing art basically in high school, and they gave, in Philadelphia, they also gave what they call side education classes in art. And one of the major art schools in downtown Philadelphia, I went there for like Saturday mornings, and they would teach artwork there, and I really enjoyed it. They taught the basics, the sketching and so forth. And one thing good, you could get there by public transportation since we didn't have a car back then. And then from there, when I got into junior high and senior high, anytime they offered art, I would take it. And in fact, one of the paintings I first did, if it ever comes up, it's
Yes.
1961.
So can we get that ship
It's the
up there?
first oil painting I've ever done.
Yes, there it is.
And that's the first oil painting I did,
So this is 1961.
1961.
Did you do a sketch of it first? I want to kind of, let's take me back to you painting this.
Actually, I drew it on the canvas first.
Okay.
And then the ship itself is all done with brushwork, except they taught me to use the palette brush. So all the water is all done with a palette brush or palette knife.
So
And
that's a knife with like a,
it's basically what you use to mix the paint.
okay.
And nowadays they have them with different tips and so forth and different widths, and you can get different textures and so forth out of it. A lot of the paintings I just did recently were of the roosters, and doing the feathers and the bright colors and so forth. You can just put a swatch of paint on it like that and get that whole feel for it. It's pretty cool.
So
I like
there's
it.
a technique with the knife.
With a knife.
That was the first time you had tried that out?
That was the first time.
Wow.
I didn't think I was painting with a knife. It was kind of weird.
That's amazing. And then we have another one, which is an actual sketch. Where do we have that? Okay, so this one, when did this happen?
That happened in high school. That's Barnegat Light. And basically, that's a place in New Jersey where we would go a lot just to go fishing and so forth. And this is actually taken from a photograph that my grandfather took.
Oh, wow.
And the boat you see in it was something in which the people would rent just to take out, because the light is basically where the bay and the ocean meets. So people would go out and crab and so forth and fish. And Barnegat Light's very famous in the New Jersey area.
That's
So,
amazing.
I did this as just a pen and ink.
That's okay. So the thing with pen, obviously, if you've ever used one, you can't really erase it. So does that add an extra little amount of stress?
Not really. Because you can cover up your mistakes eventually, unless you do something out of the lines.
Okay.
But I did sketch it first in pencil.
Okay.
So I knew what I was working with. The problem comes when you start doing your shading and everything. You have to do just a gradual.
Like a gradient?
Yes, almost a gradient, yes.
Very
But
nice.
It's cool.
And then there's a sunset one. So we talked a little bit about how you love color. And I kind of wanted to show that colorless sketch just because the next one is just vibrant. And I mean, being in Sarasota, the sunsets and just the colors of the sky are so beautiful. And I feel like capturing what you see in real life, that is so difficult. And I feel like that's absolutely beautiful.
Actually, it's very easy to do.
Really?
It is. It's blending. And because you're working with oils in this case here, and you basically you can blend your oils a lot better than you can with the acrylics. I'm learning more to do with the acrylics, but it's so much easier with the oils. The downside to the oils is it just takes a long time to dry. So here you do your background and you just gradually work forward. So you're doing the background first, then work your way forward. In this case here, the boats were the last thing that went into the whole picture.
Wow.
And they're dark. And making as what I've learned, you make your lights lighter and your darks darker. So, and you have to figure out in a painting, where is the source of light? And in this case, it's the sun, which is setting, and that's the focal point.
Is that
And-
the first thing that you paint? The lightest part?
Yes. Well, sometimes you can go back if you want to make it more brighter, and you're constantly working the two. But once you get the background done, you kind of leave it alone. You try to anyway, then you work forward. And of course, of the sunset, it changes constantly.
Right.
I mean, if you don't take a picture, you've lost it.
Right.
So you can't sit there with an easel and go ahead and just paint the sunset because it's not going to be there very long.
Right.
And you
So,
can't paint that fast.
yeah, well, especially with oils.
Correct.
This last one has a really cool story.
The Venice. This is an acrylic. Now it does have some oil mixed into it for blending,
Okay.
because this is before I learned how to blend with the acrylics. And this one eventually I gave it to our neighbor next to us, Elvira, and she's from Croatia. And her husband were married, and that's where they spent their honeymoon. And she just recently lost her husband. So I know Joni said, you just should give her the picture, get her the painting, and we did. And she now has it hanging in her condo, and every time she sees it, she's reminded of her husband. And they have been there a couple of times since their wedding, and she says, I've been at that spot.
That's amazing.
So it was great. And I says, to me, that's worth everything because it brings back to her good memories.
I love that. So speaking of traveling, you are getting ready to go somewhere very interesting.
Oh, yes, we're going to Israel. For me, a second time.
Okay, I would love to know your first time. What was the unexpected Israel finding? Like, what did you? Because I mean, you see pictures of it, you've heard of it. It's kind of one of those places that feels like this magical. Like you hear a lot about it, and then when you're there, what is it like? Does it meet that expectation, or were you blown away?
Exceeded it. I think the biggest thing is that things are closer together than you think. First of all, you have to remember people back in biblical times, if they didn't ride a horse or a donkey, they walked. And it was primarily walking. So everywhere they went, they had to walk. So things were closer than you really think about. For instance, we were standing in the shepherd's field, and Bethlehem is just over there. It's not that far away.
Right.
And I'm going, now I can see how they can get there. It's not like miles and miles and miles.
Right.
It's maybe a mile, 2 at the most.
That's amazing. So
Yes.
what kinds of things do you do there?
You go to all the different sites, which is good. And Of course, we have a guide whose name is Mike. Mike was there last time. We're having him this time as well.
Ooh, that's nice.
Very knowledgeable. He's also Palestinian. He's a very, very knowledgeable man.
Awesome.
And you go all over, which is good. And you hear different aspects of the history of the Bible. And not just from Mike, but also now that Pastor Larry's there, that adds to it as well. And I think one of the most touching ones is when we were in the Garden of Gethsemane, right next to where the tomb is. I don't think it's the real one. They say it's as close to it as you possibly can get. But Larry had us all together, and we did a mini communion and so forth. And that was cool. I really enjoyed that.
It's almost like you're acting out in person those stories that you've heard a lot, and then being in the actual spaces. Does that add new meaning to the stories?
When you read the Bible again, you look at it differently because you've been there, you've done that, to be on the Sea of Galilee and know where Jesus was, and these so many stories about the Sea of Galilee and the Sermon on the Mount where it actually took place. You are there, and because me and the architectural mind goes, okay, he's standing there and there's 5,000 people there. How are they all hearing him? Yeah, it's like, but it's almost like the ground itself. If he's standing at a certain spot, they probably could, because it's like an amphitheater.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
I love that you're thinking about that.
I do. And I'm going through the different buildings and so forth, and I'm looking, wow, how did they build this thing back then, and how did they do this back then? So it's
cool.
pretty amazing. Yeah.
So what are you looking forward to the most the second time around?
This time, just taking it in. Now that you've been there and you're just thrilled with everything, or enthralled. So it's like, okay, now I can take it in and really get into it. And I've done a lot more reading about it and so forth, so that's going to add to it as well. The stories will come to life, which is what I like.
We have a couple of the paintings that you have. This is a specific category. You paint a lot of different things, but these are very, very colorful, which I love, because that's something that you talked about in the podcast, is that you love using color. So I would love to show these rooster pics. Here we go. Absolutely beautiful. Will you kind of talk through, as we kind of cycle through these, will you talk through what it's like to paint such an amazing bird?
Well, first of all, I was asked to do this by a friend of mine here in Suncoast for his wife as a surprise. And I've never painted a rooster in my life. And I decided I have to do some research. And I didn't believe there's such a variety of roosters out there. There's thousands of them. And really? I'm figuring no matter what I paint, I'll match one of them.
Yeah.
And then it kind of worked out that way. And I look for different poses and different colors and different everything else. And I actually painted most of these with a palette knife. And I'll tell you something, especially the one that's up there right now, the wood background, that was done very easily. You basically do a black background, and you take and you cover it with Elmer's glue.
Oh.
And then you paint right over the glue, then use a hairdryer, and the hairdryer gives you the effect of the wood graining.
Really?
That's
Did you
very
invent
simple.
this technique?
No, someone showed it to me, and I tried it a couple times.
That is amazing.
This is cool.
Yeah.
And it's a very simple way, because I'm thinking, I'm going to draw on all the graining and so forth. No, it's so much easier, and it almost gives you a relief of 3D.
Yeah.
Because where the glue is and hasn't dried, it just opens up.
I love that.
And you just put it on there nice and thick. It's cool. I love it.
Okay, now I need to know other little secret tips and tricks for getting textures and all that.
Well, on the roosters, when I was painting a Barbosa, a couple of the roosters I would paint upside down. And I got a lot of comments about that. He's painting upside down? Yeah. So in doing so, you do it because when you're doing your stroke with your palette knife, you're actually, the way you finish gives you the finish of the feather. Mm-hmm. So that's the reason why I would paint it upside down. You start where you want to, and then flip it. And then you do layer upon layer. And you're doing it in acrylics, so it dries fairly quick. It allows you to put the different layers on. If you did it in oils, it would take you forever.
Yeah. So the difference between acrylics and oils, we talked a little bit about, but will you kind of share?
Well, oils are definitely an oil-based paint, and they take a long time to dry. Although there are new oils out today that do dry much quicker, but I haven't used those because they're so expensive. And the acrylics, they're a plastic base, everything else, and they dry very quick. So you have to learn different techniques. If you're painting with oils, you have time to correct certain things, but you also have that drying time, and that could be days. Whereas on acrylics, you have to work quick, unless you're just doing the actual color and just doing layer upon layer. And you can do certain things with acrylics you can't do with oils, and there's certain things you can do with oils you can't do with acrylics.
I love that you can get different effects with, I mean, for the person who doesn't paint, I'm sure they look at a painting and they're like, it's paint. But then you as an artist, you're like, I know what kind of paint and this, like the techniques. I just love kind of that behind the scenes look. So would you say that you enjoy experimenting with oils or acrylics more?
Actually, both, because a lot of times I'll start the painting itself with acrylics and finish up with oils.
Oh, you can mix them both?
You can mix them both. You have to let the acrylics dry very well.
Okay.
Like a day or two to make sure it's good and dry. And then you put the oils over top of it, and that allows you to do the blending, which is what you want to do.
Very cool. And then, so you served on 2 different boats in the Coast Guard.
Correct.
I love how you described, so the one is a search and rescue, and then the other one is an icebreaker.
Yeah, it was the Coast Guard cutter West Wind. It's an icebreaker. And an icebreaker is a very unusual ship because it's shaped like a football underneath. And that's mainly for the ice. But it draws as much water as an aircraft carrier. And that's also done by design. And it's an extremely strong ship. It can literally take a direct hit with a torpedo in the bow. Probably wouldn't hurt it, other than take some paint off of it, because it's so thick. And it has to, because you're hitting ice. But you don't. People think they just hit it and break it. Actually, what they do is they have the engines. You actually ride up on the ice, and as you're riding up on top of the ice, you're actually with high velocity pumps, pumping all your liquids, which other than fuel. Your water and so forth to the bow, and you actually crush it, and you back up. It's a monotonous thing. You're constantly going back and forth, back and forth. So you're doing that till you can't, and we did get stuck.
What do you do when you get stuck?
You actually wait for the wind to change.
No
until
way.
you see crevices and get out. We were stuck for almost a week and a half. So it was unusual.
Okay. Do you plan for that? Like before you guys go out on to the voyage, it's like we could get stuck?
We had the icebreakers also have helicopters. They have 2. One's mantled, one dismantled. So they keep the one that's mantled on the flight deck. And when we went out the first time with the pilot and myself, because there's just the small ones with like the globe in the front, just 2 people. And we would fly, and we're looking for the different crevices and so forth. Sometimes they would go out and set dynamite in there and try to blow them apart so you can go out and get into open water.
Right.
But we couldn't find one. And we went out about 20-some miles. You can still see the ship because it never gets dark up there at the time we were there. And all of a sudden, the chopper decided not to work. So down we went. So we had to wait for them to assemble the other one because they couldn't get to us using snowmobiles, and they weren't going to walk it because they couldn't do that either. So they had to wait and put the other chopper together and then bring out the part because they knew what it was.
Yeah.
And they flew the mechanic out, and then that one flew back and took me back. But we were about 15, 16 hours out there, and it was cold.
You're talking about this so nonchalant. That sounds like my worst fear, is being stuck in the Arctic on a helicopter and then the helicopter goes down. How do you land a helicopter that's going down?
Well, we were only a couple feet off the ground anyway.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't too bad. And he heard it, and they have what they call, I forget what, they have a terminology they use it for, a roto thing, but they can set them down if they're not too high.
Okay.
And it's pretty safe.
Whew. But it was cold?
Oh, yeah. We kept taking the glass part of the helicopter and facing the sun and just staying inside. Because now they have what they call survival suits, and what they are is it's a belt you have around your waist, which is just a pack of batteries. And these wires go to your hands and your feet and some other parts of the body to keep you warm, but they only last so long. Mm-hmm. So, and the batteries did not have the life expectancy they have today. So what we did, we made sure our feet were warm and our hands were warm. So we would put that on for a couple minutes, then turn it off, and did it that way. Because we had no idea how long we were going to be out there.
Right.
And to get water, you just go get a piece of ice. Just suck on the
nature.
ice. Get it from the ice. And we had a couple of those, they call them different kind of bars back there, protein bars. Mm-hmm. It was basically hardtack. So you had some of that as an emergency kit on board. We just wrote it out. And then, of course, communications was intermittent because you're a straight line, but it's so cold up there that sometimes the radios just don't want to work.
Man.
This is back before a lot of the transistors and everything came out.
Yeah.
So still tubes.
I can't believe that. That is so cool.
The alpacas or llamas, I can't remember.
Alpaca, okay.
Alpacas, yes. One of the people that come here, they raise those on their farm.
Oh.
And they live near Larry, Pastor Larry. And they have these, and they raise the, this was the one, it's actually a painting of a photograph where the young one was just born. And that's the reason why usually they're very furry and so forth. So I had to capture it in, like they were still wet.
Yeah.
And that's what I did there. And it was this one and another one. They just wanted something, an artwork to, so they can remember them by, other than the photographs.
Yeah,
It was the
so
first
cute.
time I've ever done them. And actually it was fun to do. And I actually made it scenery-wise on their farm. So
Oh.
that's how it looks.
I like that.
And that's from a photograph. But the photograph was so dark, it was difficult, so I had to go back and forth to other photographs that they had and see their true colors and everything else. And you kind of improvise a little bit, but at least I
Very
got the
nice.
feel in there.
Yeah.
I just like the mama and baby.
Yeah, I love
Pretty
it.
cool.
It was so cute. And then this next one, I'm interested if this is a place that you've been to or if this was based off a photograph as well.
This is Connemara, Ireland.
Oh.
And it's famous for its Connemara marble, which is
Okay.
all over the world. And this is just driving around in Ireland, I saw this and we stopped and I just took the photograph. And I said, I've got to paint this. That's mainly why I took the photograph. I said,
Yeah.
it's just so great. It shows the mountains in the background, the lakes in the front, and that island out in the middle.
I love it. That's so beautiful. I can't believe that you've been there in real life.
Yes, a couple of times. Actually, my wife's been there a lot more than that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, yes.
Is this kind of off the beaten path, or if you were driving on a specific road, would you be able to pull off and find it?
It's not that far off the beaten path. There's only a few major highways in Ireland. The rest of it's off-road, you call it.
Yeah.
But it's not off-road. They're decent. It's decent roads
Okay. But just a lot of beautiful nature.
all
I
over the
mean,
place. They call it the Green Emerald Isles for a reason.
I love it. And then this next one, I love the story behind it. So this is from a place that you used to go with your daughter?
Yes.
Okay.
This is Ocean City, New Jersey, and the carousel on the boardwalk. And they still go on vacation up there quite often. And what I did, I took the carousel, which my granddaughter loved. And in fact, she's in the picture. She's sitting down in the one seat there.
Oh.
And I actually in doing this, I had to take out half the horses because this is very time consuming.
Yeah.
And in the background on the carousel, it was all mirrors. And I decided to take and replace the mirrors with scenes of Ocean City. So they now have this in their house. It was supposed to be in my granddaughter's bedroom, but she's got so many stuff all over her bedroom from her horses and everything. It's now in the dining room at the house.
Oh, nice.
But also on the one side, you have the custard place where we always go get our custard. It's still in the same location. I just pulled it in for the picture,
Right.
artist liberties. And the same thing on the left side. It's where we used to get hamburgers and hot dogs and so forth. It's just, that was the place, carousel, where we kind of grouped. And I mean, the boardwalk's pretty big, but that's where we all hung out most of the time.
I love that you capture, and I love the liberties that you take to kind of pull more meaning into the picture, so that when you see it, it's not just, this is a scene. It's like all those little pictures in the back are kind of pulling those extra little memories, and I love that your daughter's in there. So cool.
The horse in the center, actually, the colors of the saddle are not what's in the actual photograph.
Oh, really?
No, in fact, they're all different. I actually asked my granddaughter favorite colors because it's always purple. So that's why the purple's in the part of the saddle part. And they're always very colorful horses. And unbeknownst, when we did this whole thing, the horse she now has, Lucy, is pretty close to this color. Instead of where it's brown, it's gray.
Oh,
So
my
her horse
goodness.
now, Lucy, is white.
Aw.
The other one is Emma. She's brown, so she's like off to the side.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love that. So it seems like you have found a nice balance of weaving hobby with your professional life. I mean, both require similar skill sets, both require this attention to detail and, understanding how structures work, understanding how the eyes look at things and take in colors and all that. So I love that you've blended those two worlds in ways that you can still do both those things that you love. So what would your advice be to people like me who it's almost like the world of opportunity seems so open and I'm struggling with the choice to choose the thing that I want to do or those few things to do and kind of focus on those. So what would you say to the people who maybe are in the same boat where they don't exactly know which direction to take their life?
Well, when it comes to art, I know a lot of people think it's just certain people are artists, but I think everyone's an artist. It's just to what degree. And of course, the beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And there's certain pieces of work out there that I look at that are done by famous people, and I don't see it. There are a lot of people who do. It's just like different cars. And I think if you have something you want to try, do it. There's nothing, especially today, there's nothing to stop you, nothing to hold you back. And if you have a passion to do something, go do it, try it. Because if you don't, and you get to my age, you wish you had. And I figure the younger you do it, I mean, like right now, if I had continued doing music when I was back doing it in my junior high school days.
I didn't know you did music.
Yeah, I tried it. Let's leave it go at that. But I wish when I see the group up here and so forth, I'm going, oh man, I wish I had stayed with the trumpet or with the drums or with the piano and so forth. I tried several, but at the time, I just couldn't afford the instruments. But at least I gave it a shot.
Right.
And of course, my father said, will you stop playing that?
Yeah, anytime, I mean, it's one of those things where in order to play an instrument, you do have to practice.
Yes.
But I think a lot of times the actual practice, either the people listening or the people doing the practice, I mean, kids, who wants to sit down and sit there and play scales on the piano forever? Like, they don't understand why, and it's because years down the road, you won't even have to think about that anymore. So the practice, as horrible as it may be, is vitally important. And I feel like trying it, yes, you're so right. You have to try it just to see. But when did you realize this isn't for me?
Well, you got to make a living. And you can't make a living doing art unless you become very famous. You don't do that when you're very young. So I said, I'm not going to have the family get the benefits of my artwork when I'm dead. So I started to make a living. So that's why I went to architecture, because I love structure, I like building things. So that prompted me to going into that. But the one good thing about architecture, back before computers, you had to render all of your plans. Either you did a floor plan and show the color of the floor plan for interior work, or you would render the elevation of the building, or you would draw an isometric of it and render it. Render means put color, people, and so forth, and shadowing into it.
To show the scale and all that?
Show the scale, and to show the client what you're actually building. Because they only see a flat drawing of it.
Right.
And they really can't visualize it. And that's one thing I've learned over the years is most people can't visualize. It's either you have it or you don't. Some learn it over time, but for the most part, you do that. And when you're doing a presentation, here's the design, and especially if it's a building, and you're asking these people to commit to several $1 million, they have to be on board. So we used to call them dog and pony shows, and that's exactly what we call them. And you just do a whole presentation in front of people. Now you can do it on computer, and you can do 3D modeling and so forth, which makes it much, much easier. And they can see it. It's great tools.
Yeah.
Kind of wish I had it back then, which when I try to do it today, I'm not proficient on the computer like I should be. And it's difficult to learn that system, especially when you can still do it the old way much faster.
Right. So do you feel like the way that you have it is the way that it works best for you? Or do you feel like you are going to eventually incorporate, because you're basically referring to things like Photoshop and like AutoCAD, things where if you know the program, you can plug it in and it kind of does it for you, versus is the old way kind of just literally drawing it all yourself and coloring it all yourself? Or was there any sort of help back then?
No, there was no help. You did it all yourself. There was no Photoshop, nothing. There was no computers. So people forget that computer didn't exist.
Yeah.
So I remember the first time I saw an AutoCAD program or an AutoCAD system was in California. We were doing the San Francisco Stock Exchange, and the architectural firm was called Keenel Human, and they actually invested at the time several $100,000 in an AutoCAD system.
Wow.
And they had these big plotting machines and so forth. You had to constantly change the inks, and it was just a massive. I'm going, who can afford that kind of a system to do? But they were doing monumental work, and basically the plans they turned out weren't all that great. But as time went on and things evolved, it got much and much better. I have a program now at home. It's called Auto Architect or Chief Architect, and there's different levels of that. I'm learning how to use that, and it's pretty amazing because when you get done doing a plan, you can basically put the people inside the structure, and they can visually see it. You can change colors. You can add different things. You can add furniture to it. You add scale to it, add shadowing to it, add lighting to it. It's really great. I just used it this past week at work with someone we're doing their home, and they saw details that they wouldn't see until it was finished.
Right.
And they said, we don't like that. I said, yeah, it's the only way you're going to see it. So we changed it. So it's a good tool to use.
Yeah, that's awesome. Ooh, okay. I have literally like 20 seconds, and your wife, Joni, is here. I would love to know, what is the secret to a good relationship?
Let your wife make all the big decisions.
Very good. Can you guys give it up for Bob? Thank you so much for coming up on Coffee Talk. Check out his podcast. It's going to go live tomorrow on Suncoast Community Church's YouTube channel. Thanks for being here, Bob.
Thank you.